and they just shot him dead. These were the guys who left bloodstains in the boat of a family who didn't deserve it. So I go ahead and introduce myself.
Go for it.
Well, my name's TJ. My father is Kirby Logan Archer. If anyone's ever heard of him. 2007, he murdered 4 people along with his accomplice on the Joe Pool in Florida. You can look that up. That's mainly what the media and the laws and his charges were focused on, but there was a lot of bad things going on in the background that they dropped because they felt it was unnecessary, and that's kind of what I want to go over with, and along with other things. Um, so like I said, I like to start my story a bit before I was born. So there was a man who went AWOL from the army after some things came to light about him and potentially children around the base that he was at. So he went AWOL, but of course, instead of anyone actually getting this guy off the streets or charging him with anything, they just said he was AWOL and didn't follow up with it at all. So he continued to live his life however he saw fit. A few years go by, and there's a woman who is due to marry a man, her high school sweetheart. And then 2 weeks before the marriage, she runs off with the aforementioned man that left the military, absent without leave. She had known him for just a few days, as a matter of fact. They go off to Germany, and voila, that's how I and my sibling came about. I didn't know that I also had another brother that was a bit older than me, who was actually my second cousin, because this man that I mentioned had violated his niece as well. And she was pregnant with his child when he met my mother. So everything goes kind of good for a little, and he doesn't show his true colors for a long time. Then, around when I was 2, it all really came to light. He was physically abusive to my mother, and sexually abusive to both myself and my sibling. My mother first found out because when I came home, because they had split up because no one wants to be in the same house as a man who beats you. And I came home with blood in my diaper. I was 2. And my mom asked my dad about it, and he was like, oh, it was probably just like a rash or something. And then I go back with my dad, come back 2 weeks later, and the skin had been sheared off of my genitalia. He had filleted me down there. And that was when my mom actually realized that something very wrong was with this guy, beyond just hitting her. Then we moved to the US again, and they finally broke up, and the court system really screwed us over. It was 2004, 2005-ish. My mom brought a lot of evidence of sexual abuse to both myself and my sibling, and because it was in the South, the court ruled that I should be raised by an American man on American customs, and not an Asian woman by an Asian woman on Asian food and Asian customs. My mother was born in the U.S., but because of her complexion, that's what they ruled. So it continued for 5 more years. And we had exhausted pretty much every avenue that we could where we were. There were others that were involved. My step siblings, that when he remarried, they were both being sexually abused by him, and they sexually abused me as well. My stepsister was 14 to 16, I remember her. And my stepbrother was 12-ish to 14. And it was kind of mutually decided with my brother and I that whenever they asked us to volunteer for things, that I would, because I was the older one. So that was how that went. So yeah, it was, thinking back on it now, it was a very bad situation, and no one should go through it. But the thing is, this all started when I was 2 and ended when I was 7, 8. So I didn't know it was particularly bad or wrong. I thought that when you look at a TV and there's a happy family there, I thought that was just Hollywood. I thought it was normal for you to not be able to walk some days, or that you're covered in bruises, or that your siblings would do things to you while your step-parent and parent watch. So yeah, that was a major part of it. The only reason it stopped, even after I had gone to the school and told them as a child what was happening, nothing was done about it. Other kids from around our neighborhood came forward. Now that it was other families, they decided to get involved. And when the FBI basically busted down the door, he was already gone. He was schizophrenic, and he had stolen $28,000 from the Walmart he managed, and fucked off, or buzzed off. And then what you can find on the internet and movies and books pretty much picks up from there. He goes to Florida with his boyfriend, who his accomplice in his crimes was also a child that he had sexually abused when he was in the military. It's believed. They go and trying to go to Cuba or Guam. I always forget. It's one of those two. They charter a boat because they were construction workers, and trying to go to an island, and they murdered the 4 people on board. The people had kids. They had lives. How much money they were offering for this charter was their big break kind of thing. And they just shot him dead. Which was complete waste of life, not only for the fact that it's a life, but they didn't even make it. They didn't know that they didn't have enough fuel. so they don't get anywhere close, and they're just adrift at sea. Lifeguard finds them, and they pull them out of the water. They said some dumb stuff about pirates attack the ship, but took nothing. Then they tried to get my father and his accomplice to commandeer the boat, ran out of fuel, and just left them alive as witnesses. That's retarded. And they figured out from the boat that they had found a few days before that these were the guys who left bloodstains in the boat of a family who didn't deserve it. And they get prosecuted, and all the child abuse things, what they were actually looking for him for to begin with, swept under the rug. That's my main reason for wanting to talk here. If you look on his file and everything, on all the charges he was made, while it's deserved, it only mentions the acts that he did running from what he did to us. I wish that life got better from there.
You'd think some of the articles would, mention that about him, but they don't.
Yeah. Well, a big part of that was, my mom didn't want us mentioned at all, which it's a major part of what makes this guy a monster. Everyone calls him a monster because of what he did at the end of his free life before he was incarcerated. But that's just the last 3 months of everything he did. There was years of what he did to children and people, and he was a master manipulator. Everyone who talked to him thought he was the best guy, or my mother fell for him in just a few days, kind of thing. He knew how to get in people's heads. That's what he did while he was in the military. And pair that with a quite literal crazy person. He was schizophrenic. Like I said before, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And with known allegations. Oh, I forgot to mention, my stepmother was 14, 16, in that range. When my father was caught with her, before, there was never for sure if anything had happened, but everything that I know about the guy, I know it did. And then she marries him.
Yeah.
And he was an adult by then. But yeah, a lot of this stuff was covered up by my mother because we were children at the time, but I'm a legal adult now, and I can say that I want this part of the story to be heard. Because it's just a small story that did cost 4 people their lives. But it's only a fraction of what this monster did in his life. And they still didn't give him the death penalty. Which don't know about anyone else, but I'm all for people like that. Both with my father and my stepfather after him. Whenever I talk to people, I'm a GAM, a grown man, and I shake physically whenever I interact with people. Or even I play a lot of D&D. Trying to just roleplay a character, and I'm excited about something or I want to talk about something, I will be shaking the entire time. I'm ex-military. I've seen some things, but even that couldn't get that out of me, I guess. After everything with my biological father, thought it was like smooth sailing from there type deal. But lo and behold, it wasn't. So in 2007, I remember going into the living room and seeing that my father was caught on TV. And that breather, that weight, that little 8-year-old me didn't realize that he was holding on to. That breath that he was holding in, that he didn't realize was even there. Because I was just realizing that it was all very bad. And life was good for a little bit, like a year or so. And then my youngest sibling that my mother and stepfather had together started talking and walking around. And my new stepdad that did all sorts of things with me and my other sibling that went through all that. Go out and play sports, go out and play this game called Hero Escape. If you've ever heard of that, it's pretty cool. And then when my youngest sibling started walking around his actual blood, started talking and walking, it all changed on his side too. So it would start out with him wrapping us in thick blankets, and this guy's an ex-Marine, over 6 foot tall, heavy dude, would wrap my sibling and I in blankets, basically like bear hug it and lay down with all of his weight to the point where we would pass out. And then other times we'd get picked up by our ears and lifted and put up against the wall. That's when the punishment of starvation really started, where I'd have to make a pack of crackers and a bottle of water last a week. So by the time that I was 14, 15, I weighed 58 pounds at 5'8". So I got in the habit of taking food to eat because I was quite literally dying. That was a no bueno. So I would get beat. He had a metal studded belt that had metal, like the thick metal spikes that go out like a few centimeters. And he had hit us so many times with it that in some of the last few times I remember him hitting, the spikes were flying out of it. And I have scars all over me from that. One time, he loves Snickers, and he would put them in the freezer. And one day, the Snickers disappeared from the freezer. And because I took food to eat, they assumed it was me. No matter how many times I sat there and was bleeding and bruised, as I got 64 licks with that belt, as he was dancing and singing as he did it. As the 64th lick hit, I was counting. So my sibling walks in and says he was the one who ate the Snickers. So as my blood is dripping from a metal-studded leather strap, my stepdad just walks out. Doesn't apologize.
My brother didn't even get a look. He just walked out. Didn't say anything the whole time my mom was watching. She didn't do anything. From doing things like picking me up off the top bunk and throwing me into the closet across the room to wake me up if I overslept or something along those lines. I had broken a few ribs throughout 5 years that we were in a house with him. So even to this day, I have a condition where I can't take in full breaths, where my lungs will touch my chest wall, or my nerves in my chest are convinced that my bones are breaking. And I would, when it first started happening, I would just breathe and I'd be doubled over in pain for like 30 minutes at a time. When I was in the military, it was because it'd come to fruition as it was like that, and they said that was the cause. But I would just be doubled over, knowing that even though it did, what was it, 7, 8 years before, it was still haunting me. And I'm probably gonna have that for the rest of my life. That finally ended because I was put into a mental institution by my mother, even though the doctors and therapists had said that there was nothing psychologically wrong with me, even though the little PTSD. But whenever a doctor would say that I don't need to be on the medication I'm on, I was a literal zombie. I didn't feel anything for years. You're not supposed to be taking them that high of a dose for that long. And she was convinced that I had all these psychological issues, that I was crazy, or that I would hear voices. I never said anything, I never have. But anytime that a psychologist, psychiatrist said I didn't need to be on those meds, she would pull me out of their office and throw me into another one and put me on the meds again. So because my brain was chemically altered for that long, it's still hard for me to feel things normally. Like I don't get angry because I don't know what it's like to have that city build. I literally rage when I get angry, because that's the point where it hits that threshold where my brain actually takes into account emotion. So I do nowadays, now that she did that, she made it come true. Even like sadness and things like that, I don't necessarily feel it like a normal person does, because of that threshold I have to reach before I shed a tear. But turns out she has Munchausen's by proxy, which is Munchausen syndrome, where you always think you're sick, but Munchausen's by proxy is a parent always thinks their child is sick. So because she was sick in the head, she made me chemically messed up in the head. These people have to live with these things for the rest of their lives. Another thing that's wrong with me because of what happened is I'm hypersomnic. I have to literally have a shock bracelet, I have it on now, to wake up, because my brain is convinced that if I just stay asleep, that nothing bad can happen to me. So it's takes a lot to wake me up. And all because it's something I can never really escape. But besides all that, besides everything I went through, I'm doing okay now. I'm doing pretty good. I have a job. I make money, obviously. I'm living with my family to help out because I forgave my mother, even though she stood idly by for so long. Because she's now dying. So I decided that I'd go back home and help. It's not that I have to be home, it's that I can be. I made that choice. Which is another thing that I guess gives me strength to do is like I'm an independent person that and I forgave a major part of a lot of that's happened to me. Got to where I could eat again and gain weight. When I was 14, as I said before, I was only 58 pounds. Then when I was 15 to 16, I got up to 78. By the time it was my senior year of high school, I had eaten and put enough muscle on, because I was doing sports, to leave high school at 145 pounds. So in less than 2 years, I doubled it. Because that's what my body was supposed to be at. I'm now 160, doing pretty okay.
Nice.
Although there are those, thanks. Although there are those health issues that I can work around. Like I said, I have a shock bracelet to help with waking me up in time to go to work. I do things to help myself emotionally. I have gotten really good at taking small breaths. So I can do things. It gets better. Some people get dealt that really bad hand. But as long as by the end of it all, those cards are back in your hand after they've been thrown on the table, you can order them however you want. You can make the bad things that have happened to you in your life be what make the good things shine even brighter. There's only light when there's dark, and there's only dark when there's light. And living in the dark and not even realizing it for the third of my life, and then realizing it and seeing it and living it when I was actually aware of it, it makes seeing the good times hit you so much harder. And like sometimes you can even forget just how bad it was when you're surrounded by the good that life can actually give.
Thank you for telling people about this.
Thank you for the opportunity to. I've been trying to find someone who would kind of allow it to get out there.
Of course.